Today we continue on with our NHL offseason plan series, and we're looking at the 10th ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Boston Bruins. The Bruins have some very difficult decisions to make this offseason and could see substantial change. We'll discuss what to expect from them coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're analyzing the Boston Bruins regular season and playoffs and looking at what to expect from them in the NHL's offseason. And so getting into full swing here as most teams are now wrapped up and completed for the year. We're down to the final four teams here as we record this video, not too far away from handing out the Stanley Cup. And of course, the Bruins were just recently eliminated by the New York Islanders in the NHL second round of the playoffs. Now, first up, we're going to take a look here at the regular season stats for the Bruins, analyze their salary cap space, take a look at any expiring contracts that need to be either signed or replaced this offseason, and then we're going to look at the top burning questions facing this franchise as we head into the offseason. So let's get started by looking at the regular season results from the Bruins. So as you can see, the Bruins finished with a really solid record this year, 33, 16, and 7 for 73 points. They had a plus 32 goal differential, so a really solid campaign overall. And so they were the 10th best team in the NHL for points this year. They had a pretty solid showing on special teams as usual. The power play clicked at a 21.9% efficiency rate for 10th best in the NHL. And on the PK, they were 86%, second best in the NHL. So really solid results there overall. So this team scored well, they defended well, they had good special teams, good goaltending. Like a lot of things really went right for the Boston Bruins this current offseason. Of course, heading into the playoffs, they made it to the second round, or the division final, I guess you could call it, of these 21 Stanley Cup playoffs here. Obviously, eventually, like I mentioned, lost to the New York Islanders. So, of course, right now they're still looking to stay in win-now mode as long as they have some top guys on their team like Bergeron and Marchand, etc. You know they're going to continue to want to go for it here and see how much they can hang into contention while that window is open with these superstars on their team. Now, into this offseason, the Bruins have just shy of $27 million available in cap space, but they do have a lot of expiring contracts. So even though that sounds like a lot of money that's available, there's a lot of players that spread it around over and might make for a lot of tough decisions. So let's dive in next and take a look at what their contract situation is this offseason and who is on an expiring deal. So as you can see on the RFA column, which is about half the size of the UFA column, we have some interesting players, so their futures are certainly debatable here. We got Andre Kasha, who has been, a good player, but man, he's got the worst luck with injuries. Ended up coming back late in the season, got hurt again and was shut down. I'm not sure what kind of break this guy can get here. I'm not even sure he's going to be able to continue playing. Like, he's had so many concussions. It's getting to the point where you do seriously have to wonder what his future holds and if he has a future in hockey. It's been very unfortunate. A lot of talent, but a lot of bad luck as well. You get Nick Ritchie. Ritchie, I think fair to say, had an up and down season, but many feel he likely stays with the Bruins team and gets a new deal. You get Trent Frederick, certainly brings some energy and some spark to this roster. Likely gets signed. You get Zach Senyshyn, and then you get Brandon Carlo, obviously a very important defenseman, another guy who's had a very unfortunate run of injuries, and another guy who's had too many concussions at a young age. I don't think he's at a point where you have to question his future, but any more of these is going to really put some serious things into question here. Carlo's had a couple of concussions just this season alone, so hopefully he can stay healthy and ink a longer-term deal here with the Bruins, because he's certainly a big piece of that back end. Now, looking at their UFA list, there's some, again, very interesting veteran presence here, and a lot of question marks and tough decisions on what they're going to do moving forward. Of course, you get longtime Bruin David Krejci, was their highest-paid player last year, number 2 center for quite a while, so we have to talk about him, which we'll get into a lot in the next segment too. Taylor Hall, who was a trade deadline acquisition, seemed to fit in well. Certainly had some better showing with the Bruins than he has in recent years. You got Sean Corrali. You've got Greg McKegg. You got a newly acquired Mike Riley, who was also picked up as a deadline from the Senators. Fit nicely on that back end too. Kevin Miller, another guy who's battle-tested and has tons of injuries, so I'm not sure what the future holds for him. You've got also defensemen Steven Kampfer and Jared Tenorti, who are kind of like spare parts guys who can go up and down into the AHL, NHL levels, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a guy like Tenorti stuck around as maybe being a number 7 guy can play in your American Hockey League and be a call-up, or, he's got a decent amount of experience now, can add that physical, tough element if you need it. So I can see Boston possibly hanging on to him, but it's hard to say for sure. And of course, you got your veteran goaltending tandem of Tuukka Rask and Jaro Halak both up as free agents too. So how do they handle that, especially knowing the injury situation to Tuukka Rask? So he's going to be out for the first probably 6 months or so. He's going to be out until January, February, which is a big question mark. Can the young goalies, keep up the work here? So we'll jump now into the next segment where that's going to be one of our questions, where we look at the 5 burning questions facing the Boston Bruins this offseason and how do they handle them. I'll try my best to answer them, but of course, a lot of this is going to have to wait and see how Bruins management handles all this. But let's dive in and at least look at the questions and give me your thoughts as well in the comments below and what you think the Bruins are going to do to handle these upcoming situations. Burning question number 1 is, how do they address the goaltending situation that we just mentioned? Of course, like I said, you've got Rask, you've got Halak, both free agents. You've got some pretty decent goaltending prospects in your system who had a little bit of playing time this year. You get Jeremy Swayman and Denny Vladar. Both appear like they could be NHL goaltenders. Swayman had more of an opportunity to play. I believe Vladar had an injury too as well at some point, which kind of kept him out. But Swayman's brief appearances, certainly looked really good. And I know there was some calling for him to play in the playoffs. We now know that Tuukka Rask, which we suspected earlier, was battling a pretty substantial injury during the playoffs, and I do think it's fair to say it did impact his play, especially his side-to-side movements. You could tell he was laboring and there was something serious going on. So he's obviously got a hip issue, a torn labrum. Like I said, it's about a 6-month recovery. He's expected to have surgery sometime later here in June, and it's a long road. And for a goaltender who's well into his 30s, to have a hip issue like that, it's a big recovery. So can Tuukka Rask come back and play? It's quite possible he can. Can he be the same goaltender he has been? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly going to take its toll on him, and obviously we'll see how the recovery process goes. But I think for me, if you're the Bruins, you likely do sign Rask, knowing that he's going on long-term injury reserve to start the season. At this point, I don't know if I'd be comfortable going with a Swayman-Vladar goalie combo here. I mean, they're both, good goaltenders. I have faith in both of them, but I wouldn't want to put them in a situation where they're in too deep, and if they don't have a great stretch or something, that they lose their confidence, could really have a major impact on how they develop into longer-term goaltenders at the NHL level. So for me, I think part of the Bruins' plan here was to get Swayman some action if he could. Same with Vladar this year. But Swayman was likely pegged to play a full solid year at the AHL this year coming up, is probably what the Bruins' plan was. So to me, you have Vladar, you have Swayman. I'm not sure about Jaro Halak, how he fits into all this. I'm not sure he comes back, to be honest. I think they go into the free agent market and they bring in another veteran goaltender on a short-term contract. Maybe it's only 1 year, maybe it's 2. It just depends on what you can get, I guess, because obviously there's going to be a lot of bargaining and negotiating going on. But if you can get a veteran guy on a 1-year deal to come in to kind of help stabilize things, and then you can have a combination of Swayman or Vladar kind of go back and forth being your backup, and while one can kind of stay up and down and play in the minors too, and then wait for Rask to come back, see how he does. I would sign Rask to a 1 or 2 year contract. I'm not sure I'd go too much longer given his age and his big recovery, and kind of feel it out and go from there. But I mean, I just would want to have that insurance policy that you don't have to rely too heavily on the young goaltenders, because like I said, it could have a major impact on their development if things don't go well. So we'll see what happens. But I think Rask comes back. He said it himself. He does not want to play anywhere else. It's Boston or nowheres, basically. And I think they'll work something out, bring him back. He's still a great goaltender, in my opinion. I think he could be better than most of the options that are out there. And he'd be a great mentor for these younger guys coming up, too. So to me, he comes back. You bring in another veteran guy while he's out injured. You have Swayman and Vladar can battle it out for backup. And be one of them could be the call-up option if need be. And then you reassess later on. If Rask comes back and he's doing really well, then you obviously could have a crowded crease, but that's a better problem to have than not knowing who the heck's going to be your goaltender. So that's what I see playing out, but let me know what you think about the Bruins goaltending situation in the comments. Now, burning question number 2 is, do some of these other veteran guys return, like David Krejci and Taylor Hall being the big ones in the forward position? We saw them have pretty good chemistry together on that second line. Krejci's been their number 2 center for a long time. And I think there's interest from the Bruins to not only re-sign one, but both of them. To me, it makes a lot of sense if you can get it done for the right price. Now, I don't see Krejci demanding the kind of money he did before. Like I said, he's coming off a long-term deal that paid him over $7 million a season. Maybe he comes down closer to like that $5 million mark, and I can see Taylor Hall being in that same range. I think a 3 or 4 year deal for Hall around $5 million would be ideal. That's kind of the contract I see him getting. And then when it comes to Krejci, I'm thinking maybe a 2-year deal around maybe that $4.5 to $5 million range as well. That's kind of what I see. I think their contracts will be somewhat comparable, but Hall will probably get a little bit more term. But I think there's interest on both of their parts to come back. Hall's made it perfectly clear he wants to stay. And then, of course, on Krejci's part, he said the same thing as Rass, that it's Boston or bust, basically. He said he could go back, maybe play in Europe or something, but really it sounds like Krejci wants to stay. He's got a young family, played his whole career in Boston. I think he's earned the right to really have that shot to finish things out there. So to me, they both come back. Of course, they get a negotiated contract, which is not always as easy as it sounds, but I think they get it done, and we see both of them in the Bruins lineup next year. Number 3 burning question is Bruce Cassidy going to get his wish and the Bruins sign another top 4 left shot defenseman? And I think that's going to be a major priority for them. Listening to the end of season conference here and comments from Cassidy and Cam Neely and Don Sweeney and others, to me, their blue line is going to be a big focus. That's going to be the one area that they do need to look more so outside the organization and probably dip into free agency. Of course, they've recently, in the last year or so, lost Torrey Krug and Zdeno Chara. That left side is not as strong as it used to be. They have Charlie McAvoy and Brandon Carlo, both right shot D. So your top 4 spots on the right side are in pretty good shape that way. You have a guy like Grzelcyk who can looks to the zone most nights at least. He can be a top 4 left defenseman. There's a good chance to bring back Mike Riley, who's a left defenseman. But you know what? Riley's probably better suited being a third pair player. When he was in Ottawa, he played too high in the lineup for most of that, and he didn't do well. But when he got lower in the lineup and under the right partner, it was great. So to me, you need a good stabilizing partner for him on the right side, and he can do well and be a third pair defenseman. That's not going to cost you too much. He's a great skater, good at breaking the puck out, pretty decent pass. So to me, I think there's a decent chance Riley returns as well. But they need somebody who can play up in those top 2 pairs. And to me, an ideal defenseman, and I don't know if they can make it happen or not, but just to me, what they need is a guy like Alec Martinez, who's likely not going to be re-signed in Vegas, just because I don't think they're going to be able to afford him. I think Vegas would have interest to bring him back, and maybe they try to figure that out. But I do think there's a decent chance he hits free agency, given the fact that I'm not sure they can do it. So he's having another solid year, solid playoffs, got a ton of experience. He's got Stanley Cups from his time in Los Angeles. He's in a position now where he could even possibly win another Stanley Cup this year. Tons of experience, and it would really be the kind of D-man they need back there, and somebody who they could probably get on a, I don't know, maybe anywhere from 3 to 4 year deal at a decent amount of money. It could be an excellent stabilizing factor back there. But I know Cassidy made it known at the end of season that that's his wish, is to have a guy like that come in on a veteran deal. So we'll see if they can get that done. But that's just an example. But to me, that would make a ton of sense and would really be a big help to helping this team move forward. Number 4 is forward Jake DeBrusk finally going to be traded. This relationship has been on again, off again, hot and cold for the better part of a couple years now, and we've seen him be scratched at multiple times this regular season and playoff time. And to me, I think it's just best that both parties kind of cut bait here and get a fresh scenery for him and get a new start here for the Bruins to be able to move on. I mean, unfortunately, things have just not worked out. He plays in a city like Boston where you're under a lot of scrutiny. You're expected to be your best all the time, which really should be everywhere. But in a bigger market, it just draws a little bit more attention. And obviously, he's been a frustrating player for the team and fans alike. And to me, he's got a lot of talent. I think he can get it figured out. But I think he just needs to go somewhere else and get a different approach, a different coach, different teammates, and just see if he can get things going. But to me, I think it's time that they make that plunge here and get a deal done. I mentioned Alec Martinez as being an option in free agency for the Bruins on the blue line. Maybe they use Jake DeBrusk as a trade piece and go after somebody else too. That's another option. Obviously, you have to get back something that's decent. So I could see a DeBrusk move maybe taking place as soon as the NHL Draft. Be an opportunity for that, especially if they want to. Maybe they don't get a defenseman back. Maybe they go to the route of getting a future-based prospects. Maybe they get a prospect and a pick or something like that. I'm not sure, but I think there's lots of teams out there that would have interest, including his hometown Edmonton Oilers as a possibility. And I think it's just time they need to cut bait here and move on, get him a fresh start, and I think it's best for everybody involved. And the last burning question, though, is if Jake DeBrusk is gone, and assuming that they do bring back Hall and Krejci, what are they going to do for the remainder here of their roster to kind of make sure they get enough secondary scoring? Because we've seen time and time again that when you can control what they call the perfection line of Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak, that this team is not as difficult to beat. And when you run into a team like the Islanders in the playoffs, they can shut you down. They could use more secondary scoring. If DeBrusk isn't there, and I know there's some questions on Nick Ritchie's future, what do you do? I mean, you get Sean Corrales, another guy who can at times contribute. His future is in question, being a free agent too. Their bottom guys like Lazar obviously contributed and fit in nicely, and Wagner. But you need some guys on that third line that can score. And when you have like even Andre Kasher, like I mentioned earlier, his injury history, like they've had lots of options. It's not for really a lack of trying on the management part to round up this roster. They just haven't been getting the results, and for a variety of reasons. A lot of it is a combination of fit and injuries, but if you take away DeBrusk being traded, Kasha being hurt, maybe Ritchie moves on, there's a lot of holes there. So you need some more secondary scoring to round up that second line and to get somebody on your third line. Look at a team like the Vegas Golden Knights, where they have a player like Alex Tuck on the third line, having an absolutely huge impact on their team here in the playoffs. They need that kind of depth. And to me, the Bruins are a really, really good team. Their top players are elite and really high end and take them really far, but they could use just a little bit better of a supporting cast to make them more of a cup contender. And I just think that's a little bit here that they're missing. Maybe Nick Ritchie stays and he completes that second line, but then you need, like I said, somebody more for line three. You got Charlie Coyle there, but he at times has struggled with the offensive side of the game too. So you need to get that line figured out, not only from a defensive perspective. I think that's not too bad, but offensively speaking, you need to get a little bit more help from those middle six and bottom six forwards punching in here with the offense. Those are my thoughts on the Bruins offseason. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments so we can discuss further. Of course, make sure you stay tuned for the remainder of this series. We still have several videos coming. And of course, not only the 9 teams ahead of the Bruins, but we still have teams like the Montreal Canadiens and New York Islanders that technically were lower in the standings, but we're waiting to do those videos until their season's complete, since they're still in the 21 Stanley Cup Playoffs. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.